The role of CEO.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Malik Nasser. I'm co-founder of HighLife, who is a company that makes mitral valve replacement systems. Very happy to be here and to discuss the role of CEO with four very experienced CEOs, multiple CEOs for different companies. What we'll start with is a quick presentation, everyone for himself, and then we can kick off the topic afterwards.
Hi, my name is Tom Luby. I'm the CEO of Canavi Medical. We are a Toronto-based med device company that focuses on cardiovascular intervention, peripheral intervention with the world's only IVUS and OCT catheter. Happy to be here in Malta. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everybody. My name is Youssef Biadilla. I'm CEO of a medical device company called Valletta, and we're dedicated to the treatment of obesity and diabetes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Greg Walters. I'm the CEO and founder of Excision Medical. We do leaflet modification to support secondary TAVR implantations. I'm the former CEO of Essential Medical, where we developed the Manta device. Happy to be here.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mathieu. I'm CEO and co-founder of Aspivix, a Swiss MedTech, FemMedTech company. We have the first and non-traumatic cervical stabilizer, which is clinically proven and now cleared in the US and Europe.
All right, thank you. So let's start our topic. What's the role of a CEO? And maybe let's also reflect a little bit on what is the role of a CEO in different types of startups. So you have seen different companies in different stages, and I think it didn't require the same efforts from you guys. So maybe, Tom, you'd like to start to tell us, how do you see your role, what it takes to be in your position, and how do you see it in different types of companies?
Thank you. Yes, so maybe I actually go second, but I'm not a founding CEO, and I have not been. And I look to my colleagues here who have been founding CEOs, in awe. I tend to be the guy that goes in with the founders after a while and tries to transition the company to like a different stage, right? Some of the things that made sense to do in the earlier stage, as we're growing, we don't really need to do that just yet. And so one of the roles that I take on, we always say when we're starting companies, you got to be the janitor and the CEO and everything else in between. I think at this particular stage that I get involved in, I try to start to disseminate roles and responsibilities and authority within the organization and really try to live with it, right? Because if you start to make decisions for this department or that department and don't allow them to do it, don't hold them accountable for it, you go right back to the early stage, 5 people in a garage or 10 people in a lab or something like that. So that's really my emphasis, but I'd be keen to hear what real innovative CEO founders have done.
So at Biotech, this is my third time being the first person on, first employee, founder, or CEO. And to me, the first thing is to set up the culture of the company and the values. And so for every single interview for the first 10, 15 people, I usually spend at least half an hour, either during the interview process or at lunch or dinner, really talking about the values and making sure that people are aligned with that. And then as the company grows, I try to perfect those values with the input of the people coming into the company. So to me, that's really, really, really the first most important thing. And then the other thing which is important, just making sure that the environment is safe so that people are actually, can be themselves and, being able to be okay with failures and delays, etc., because that's really important to making sure we have a productive and fun environment.
Yeah, I think it's there's a real difference, just as Tom said, there's a real difference between a startup CEO, which is really all that I'm mostly familiar with, than a maybe more established company CEO where there's already structure in place, right? But as a founding CEO, well, you really have to do it all, right? I mean, you guys are, I'm sure you all are having that experience. And the reality is you've got to define the problem, you've got to solve the problem, you got to build the team, you got to create the culture. You actually usually have to find the building, and,
it goes down to the
clean
details,
the
yeah.
building, right? So it really is everything. And then as time goes on and you build a team, then you can step back from those roles a little bit. But often you still have to jump in and sort of help nudge the culture, or you know, really show people that they do have to wash the bathroom, you know. So.
And I could not agree more. First of all, I'm a first-time CEO and a founder. What I think is my role is probably rely on three pillars. The first one is indeed, you spoke about, I think, vision, and you spoke about values. It's super important. I would say not only establishing it, it's about living with them. It's about basically walking the talk, making sure that you make it. You spoke about building a team. Super important as well, finding people who are better than you, obviously. And I didn't hear about fundraising, but I spend a good part of my time fundraising, and you cannot forget that, I guess.
Okay, yeah, we'll get into fundraising. I think everyone is interested in this topic on all panels, actually. Let's start first with me with the founder CEOs, and then we'll continue with you, Tom, on maybe transitional CEO, as you would put it. We talked about values. It's interesting that this came up first with Yusuf. And Yusuf, you mentioned also something that kind of relates to psychological safety. People can fail. How do you actually implement this in your company? How do you signify this to the employees? What are the steps that you take personally or that you've taken in your companies to make this message clear?
So this was really hard before I became actually a founder CEO or a CEO. But now what I do is that I share my failures with the team.
You share?
I share my failures with the team. So, for example, I have, you know, I'm not able to get somebody to do due diligence, for instance. I would actually share it with the team and go through that, you know, process.
And in terms of setting the values for the company, do you like do a meeting and say, let's discuss our values, or how does it work for you? What's your process?
Okay, so for that one, so I've looked at tons of companies to try to really get inspired by how they set up their values. And I just kind of made my own little sauce. And it's all about so I tried to think about the most fun people I worked with in my career. And I tried to think about what's their attributes. So the idea is the values of the company is not just the values that we pick up, but what are the values that we love about our colleagues. And I kind of tried, well, for every value you can find different synonyms. So I tried to find something about obesity. So I kind of found an acronym. So it was CHIPS, and it's, you know, C is curiosity, H is honesty, so P is passion, and S is selflessness, and E is impact.
So
I is impact.
It was a group activity, basically.
Yes.
People would really participate in it and discuss the values.
And we perfected it. So I came up with a variation of this initially, and then we perfected it as we came up about doing it. And actually, if you look at even like HR procedures within the company, they actually reflect the CHIPS values. And the same for other procedures.
Greg, what's your approach to set the values for the company? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I really think you just mirror them. I mean, as a startup company, it's small enough. We don't necessarily have HR policies and procedures, right? We really just we sort of choose how we behave, and you really just have to mirror that, right? And you also have to just make sure that you either allow a behavior or discourage a behavior, right? Because you really are what you allow, right?
Yeah, you are what you allow, yeah. You wanted to say also something, Mathieu, on this topic?
Yeah, I can add that actually we reflected, the co-founders actually reflected on how the company was built, and that is how we basically decided what should be our values. We realized that listening to the customers, the patients, was a strong value for us. So we call that L, of course. It's about caring. We care about the patient, and then the last thing was about making. What we realize is many people see a problem, understand the problem, but very few decide to move to the next step, which is making something for that. So it's a listen, care, make, which is also a least common multiplier for us.
Yeah. And then we also discussed hiring a team. And this is also something that Tom, you've been doing as you mentioned, as a transition CEO. That's how you called it. Very important to find the right people to delegate to. What's your approach for this? How do you find the right people? What's your process?
Yeah, so I've done this three times now, so every situation is different, but there are, I think, some tendencies. And one of the tendencies, you got to go in and have a macro view. What are we doing? What are we not doing? And look at where the priorities are set for the business for that particular earlier stage, right? And now the priorities have shifted, and therefore maybe the leaders also have to be, either coached up, put in different seats on the bus, or maybe recruited in. And so in the previous company, we had maybe zero medical device experience. We were engineers and scientists and things like this. And you can have this tendency to kind of reinvent wheels that somebody else has invented, right? You spend a lot of time and money doing that, and as we all know, the name of the game is we got to get liftoff before we run out of money. You can't be inventing a lot of wheels that somebody else has had. So let's go and recruit some experiences so we don't make the same mistakes that somebody else has made. We can, accelerate faster. We can have a better network external to the company and so on. So that's important for me. I think that obviously there's raw talent you can coach up. You shouldn't just wholesale, change the management team by any means. But I think that you shouldn't be afraid of making some key changes because it's going to make or break you.
What's your approach, Yusuf, to finding talent and maybe also managing talent afterwards?
Trying to hire from my network, ex-colleagues of mine, people I've worked with in the past. But it's not just about hiring, it's also about means. Do you really have the money to be able to hire people? So typically in the beginning, I would use some consultants, people I've worked with in the past, that of course are expensive on an hourly basis, but for the amount of work that needs to be done can actually still be affordable. So I typically try to transition from having 20, 30 year experience type of like regulatory, for instance, as a consultant, and then bring somebody and do the transition as the company is maturing and as we have more resources to be really able to afford full-time employees.
Maybe a word, Greg and Mathieu, about how you guys retain talent in your team. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, you naturally have a network, and you have an eye towards somebody filling a role. But what I like to really do is I like to sort of have everyone try on the role, right? So we, over a period of several months, will work with somebody, and it's kind of an extended interview. And it really helps everybody understand what they're getting themselves into, and then we understand what we're actually getting. And I think that's a really important role to sort of ease somebody on the team and to encourage and rally the team around this is what this new person's going to do for us. And then again, you've got somebody that joins the team that has an understanding of the culture that we've created or are creating, and you've got a higher success rate that person's going to settle in and be effective. So.
Maybe to add something, back to your point, it's difficult to attract people in the startup. We, in general, pay less than what the corporate can do. And something which I believe works super well is also explaining about the impact that you can have in a startup. Probably that was also why I moved from corporate to a startup, realizing that in a big ship sometimes you don't really feel your impact, while in a startup you immediately see what you can bring to patients and what you can bring to others.
Do you find that some candidates are reluctant to, I would say, maybe leave some very secure structures like strategic companies and join a startup? And what are your strategies to convince them if you hear about this concern about the security of the position? What do you say to that?
The truth.
That's true. I think it's also selecting people that have. What I really learned is you just have to select people that have a tolerance for that, right? Because it just doesn't work. Sometimes it doesn't work with somebody coming from a big corporate position into a risky startup position. They're just uncomfortable with it, right? And if they're uncomfortable with it, they're just not a good fit.
So does that mean then that they have to have startup experience?
Not necessarily. I think they have to have just a mindset that that they're at a position in their life where they could take the risk, right? That maybe they have a spouse that works and carries medical care, or whatever it is that gives them the comfort that it's time to do something a little different. So it's sometimes really hard as a startup to recruit some you know, effectively official people for those roles because they may be wary. And so often you're growing people, right?
Absolutely, and there's one thing, for example, if we're interviewing somebody who's coming from a big company, I don't want to be the person asking about, are you comfortable coming? I want the person to have that self-awareness and tell me that in the interview. And if I don't hear that in the interview or at lunch, that's, to me, it's a red flag.
Okay, thank you for this insights on hiring. Now let's talk about your daily activity. And where do you see your limits actually in regards to your team? How deep do you dig in the activities and the operations, and where do you stop? Each one in your practice. Where do you think? Do you stay high level? Do you dig into the operations? Do you go in and out of it in a way? What's your practice?
So in this transition from like a 10, 15 person team to something that's more like 70, I focus on the senior team, right? I trust that they can manage their people, set priorities, follow up with them, et cetera. But you have to flex the muscles that you know what their craft is all about and what the details of their craft are all about, and then get the heck out of it. In my opinion, that's the stage that I've been leading in, is just get out of the way. You should maybe go down deep every once in a while to challenge them just to make sure everything is right, but allow the leaders to lead is what I like to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I'm an R&D engineer, so I typically, for all of these companies, I usually, draw and prototype and the first few prototypes. And then, as we de-risk, once we have a CTO, then I will just go back in the background little by little.
So you're saying your role is changing as the company grows, basically, and as you're
Yes.
hiring people.
Yeah. But typically in the first few months to a year, I'm pretty hands-on. SolidWorks and all that, and testing, etc.
Yeah, I stay very involved technically. Well, because I like it and I think I'm good at it. Sometimes my team disagrees with that. But I think it's just really important to stay in touch with that, and I also think that it's really important to be there on a daily basis, encouraging what's evolving, because really a big role of what we do is we set the standard for what good looks like, right? And so when you have a day that starts off, it's creative, a lot of things happen, and you look around and you're like, guys, that was great. That's just really powerful for a team, and that's just my job to let them know what good looks like, and you can't let them know what good looks like if you're not there.
Maybe to add to that, we started the company, we were 2, so of course we were extremely operational, and the founders now need to make a certain transition and be less in the day-to-day operations. And that requires probably for the founders, CEO, to be extremely, how can I say that, to develop a broad skill set. And you need to change along the way with your company.
Now let's talk about one other main role. Before we get to fundraising, we're going to get to fundraising at the end, is the board relationships. How do you choose or participate in choosing your board members, and how do you manage your boards? What is your current way of doing this? Do you send, do you do monthly meetings with them, board meetings, or do you have, quarterly meetings with emails? How much information do you disclose? Tell us about the relationship you have with your boards.
I have a friendly board, so it makes it easy, right? And I think the real goal is to keep them informed, and to not make board meetings all about being an update where you really let them know what decisions need to be made. And honestly, we're sort of early on, so the whole board dynamic isn't complicated. And luckily for me, in the last one, it never got complicated. So.
I think mine was not that easy, but I think it's a lot about education. You need to educate people. One thing it took me some time to realize is that the board members are not spending as much time as you do in your company. So they need to be educated. You need to bring them in your vision, in your strategy, and that takes time. That takes a lot of effort in communication to bring them in.
Like, I know it sounds kind of basic, but first of all, boards have chosen me. I don't get a chance to choose a lot of board members, but there's some key changes that we've made over the years. And I would say, one of the things you can't tolerate so much is somebody who doesn't understand what the market is, what the business is. And, if you spend all your time re-educating what we're all about and making what the milestones, the important milestones, making it important to this individual, you probably need to go find a different board member for that. And friendly boards or not, at the end of the day, I think management teams run businesses, and you can have really good interface and transparency with the board, but there should be sort of the expectation of noses in and hands out, right? And I've been in some situations where it's a little bit more of an active board. I put the active in air quotes, but you have to manage through that as well.
So initially, the board typically would have one or two prominent KOLs, and those would transition out of the board into the SAB, Scientific Advisory Board, or the Medical Advisor Board, right after first in human, once we need to bring additional investors, but also people with more operational experience. And in terms of communication with the board, it really depends on who it is on the boards. Right now, I have monthly calls with one-on-ones with two of them, and not with the others. And I typically speak with each one of them individually, and sometimes as a group about 3 weeks before a board. So definitely before I send the pre-read slides, definitely.
So you're preparing every time the board by actually having one-on-ones before the...
Yes, and the reason why I do it, and this was, we were on another panel two days ago, and there was differences of opinion, but I feel like most of the decisions need to be made before the board and not during the board meeting, or else you really can't do everything in 2 or 3 hours. So I typically try to make sure that everybody's aligned and kind of make sure that there's going to be the minimum amount of friction and egos during the board meeting. So I want to make sure that the authority on that specific subject is back in the proposition that we're going to be making during the board, so that the board can be very fluid.
All right, so it seems like everyone agrees with that, preparing the board before they happen, and the decisions being made before, actually, so it's more like a sharing moment. All right, and getting to fundraising. Tell me how you guys prepare for this, on a round. Basically, how do you prepare yourselves? What's the information that you disclose? And also, what are the difficulties that you're seeing now that are particular to this period?
I don't know. Preparing for fundraising is sort of like standing in front of a mirror and screaming, I think. So.
Good start.
I think, look, that is absolutely the role of the CEO to do that. I think you're lucky if you have somebody in the organization that can help you do that, and I think that's important. So, to augment any role, you sort of need support of some kind. So it's nice to have somebody else that's either helping you make the contacts or make the decisions about who you're contacting, and to help you with all of the nitnoidy details about, did I email that person? Did I, because sometimes you just lose track of these giant lists and how many people you've talked to, so it's nice to have. But at the end of the day, that is, the buck stops with us on fundraising. And the first place you look, obviously, is your network, right? So we had a successful exit on the last one, and all of those investors followed me. And that's a really good start. But then you can't stop there, right? So you keep going.
You go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, how do you prepare for fundraising? I don't know, you just grit it out, I guess, right? Don't refine too much or too often on your deck, kind of have a stable narrative, which is important because people notice that if your narrative shifts all over the place. And I think it's important to simplify the story. Some of the incumbent investor narratives that I've seen have been very heavy in science, very heavy in the clinical story, which is important. But I think that you need to tell the business story first and foremost. And I think that I've seen, and I help people with their pitch decks, they really dwell an awful lot on the nitty-gritty detail and can lose the audience that way. So I think it's important to kind of strike that balance and bring it up a notch and talk about how is the business going to work and why is it important to invest now. So.
So for fundraising, it's pretty much a full-time job, and I don't see it as like phases, because you're talking with people, and 99.9% of the people you're going to talk to in the beginning, I can tell you no, but those guys may be your round B or round C investors. I think so that's important. The second one is on my second week when I started, I already had a lunch with BD M&A of a big, large corporate who had bought the company prior to this one. So I'm in contact. We're waiting for green light to do our first in human, and we're going to be treating our first patients before the end of the year. But I'm updating all of the corporates about what we're doing. So I have a list, and I send an email. Hey, we're filing now. Hey, we've done this, we've done that, and I try to do that once every quarter. So to me, it's a full-time job, and it's the whole time. I don't see it as an effort for A, B, or C. I just see it as an effort to make sure the company has money.
It's continuous. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid I will repeat a lot of things, so I won't. But no, maybe just say that knowing a business, maybe when you are a founder and you started, you know that your business very well, and you have a tendency to say too much, actually. So maybe the point is simplifying. You said it. And make sure that someone hears what you say and tell you that you say too much eventually. So you need to have trustful people around you.
And how do you choose the investors you're going to target? And is there anything specific to the current period we're going through that you find?
Well, that kind of takes care of itself because we're a PMA product, right? We're in the structural heart space, and so the pyramid gets narrowed pretty quickly. So, and after that, it's funds that have money or people that you've worked with. So, because the relationships are really important. So.
Any questions from the audience regarding whether it's fundraising or leading teams or anything we discussed today? Yes, please, go ahead.
Maybe one topic in addition to fundraising, how about selling to customers? How do you see your role changing from early stage
to a commercial CEO, basically, from a founder or a transitional CEO to commercial stage company CEO?
Yeah, David, I think that's a good question. And where I have started, it has tended to be on the technical side. R&Ds are writing the quality assurance documents. They're making the sales calls because they have to. They know the product better than anybody else. Maybe they're even selling, et cetera. And so I think that, this is what I spoke to earlier, understanding that you need some experience because you can't reinvent wheels, that people know how to sell, know how to market, specifically know how to develop a market. I think that's different than selling. And developing a market, I think, is a particular skill. I happen to have done that in my life, but the CEO job is also a full-time job, so you can help, you can infuse your know-how into it, but I think it's important to get a good leader for that.
I don't have any experience selling products once they're approved. The first company, that was 13 years ago, we fired myself and got a CEO with the experience. The second, we were bought prior, just when we filed for 510K. We'll see about this one, but I don't have the experience.
I think we transition pretty much everybody kind of grows with the company, right? So at least that's what I encourage. So we start off maybe with 10 engineers that are building the product, and then those 10 engineers actually transition into clinical specialists, at least the ones that want to, and the ones that doesn't panic. And then those people actually, they may carry on and continue with training, because a big part of the sales and commercialization then becomes how are you going to train for the product, right? And initially we used distributors for our commercialization. And if you think way back to one of the guys that was doing the design, he's actually in Europe training the distributors and calling on customers. And so we pulled people along. Now, one of the roles of CEO, as you guys all know, is we need to spot what's missing in the organization, right? And we need to have to fill that hole with the right person, I think, as you said, Tom, the right person. Sometimes you really do need a senior person, and you can't carry along or groom the people that are on your team, so you've got to add that experience. And certainly in the commercialization space, at some point in time, you have to add a senior commercialization and a senior marketing person to try to help you fill in what your other folks maybe that don't know what to do, but can help with that role. So.
And I would just add that yes, you need to surround yourself with good people. Even if I'm coming from commercial roles in corporate, so I have the feeling that I understand that type of activities, but nevertheless, there's always something you don't know. I mean, do you know enough about the US market? Do you know enough about the one specific European market? So you anyway need help and support. You need to bring a team and build a team around. Yes.
I just want to say something because it struck a chord. When we were talking about bringing talent, this is something you can do in a startup that it's very hard to do in a big corporate. You know, if you're an engineer and you want to go into clinical support, and I've had that. I've had colleagues, people within my team that wanted to do that and actually did it, and they were super happy to do it. And so this is one thing that you could be selling to potential employees. You know, you could actually make a transition, and you will be able to do it much easier in the company than in a big corporate.
I think you're right, and Gregor, you made a point. Like, if they want to do it and they have the capacity and motivation to do it, and then you have to understand, are they tracking to where you want them to mature in that particular role as well? Because then, so that's the coaching up. We coach up as many folks as we can, put them in different roles where we can, and sometimes you just have to make the decision to get a senior person, as you said.
Yeah, and I think it's really important in our roles to make sure that we know the people that are on our teams, that we really know what they're good at, and that we help them understand what they're good at, because honestly, the worst thing is a team member that's not self-aware. So, you know, if you can help them do that, then you can help put them in the roles that work for them and work for the company. And because it's really, really important for us to be encouraging our team members, and because you want them to be as awesome as they can be. And you both have to shield them from the stresses of the organization or from the from the pressures of performing, while you're also finding the right role for them and encouraging them along the way. And I think you can build the team the best way if you can just really get to know what they like to do and figure out how your organization can deliver it for them while you're meeting the needs of the organization, right? That's the trick. So.
All right, now let's take a few minutes just to reflect on your experience. Tell us how your role as a CEO has been different from what you expected, and maybe anything you would recommend to the audience that's actually listening to your recommendations on this level.
So I'll start off and be very short. I expected it to be difficult, and it is. I expected it to be fun. It really is fun. You have to have a short memory because bad things happen. You recover from it. You can't dwell on it. You got to move forward on something else. So I think it's kind of lived up to the expectations of being fun and difficult. So, you know, that was good for me.
For me, it's the typical like R&D engineer. You know, I still have to fight that urge of focusing on how cool the technology is and the patents and everything, and going back to the market and what kind of pain points you're trying to solve and the market access, which is becoming more and more important because it's becoming more and more difficult to have an exit before you're actually going to sales. So, but that's me, R&D engineer.
Yeah, well, I come from the technical side too. I honestly think that the CEO thing was almost exactly what I expected it to be, because I'm sort of a jack of all trades, master of none, And I think that the truth is that again, what we have to do as a startup CEO is you have to sort of set the tone, set the vision, create the team, do all of those things, and it's the kind of thing that it's exactly what I expected, and I would say that I was pretty happy continuing. I honestly thought that I would transition. Have an unofficial CEO. Like I was a fake CEO, right? And then I thought an official CEO was going to show up sometime. But like everyone else on the team, you grow into that role, and it's just something that maybe you do well, and you keep doing it. Right?
And maybe to make a little bit of fun of me, I thought that as soon as I would be CEO, I would strike a fantastic strategy, and I would follow it, and it would work. I realized that actually nothing exactly occurs as you expected. You have unforeseen challenges are always on the way, so you need to be nimble, you need to adapt, and that's probably something I learned.
Tell us about what you see today as a low point in your position, something that's difficult, and something that also drives you.
Well, everything's difficult. Yeah, everything's difficult. I mean, I think what we're doing is challenging. And I think you just kind of recognize that and try not to beat yourself up too hard about how hard it is or how it works out. And what was the last question?
Something that you feel as a low point and something that drives you,
Oh,
the one thing
sure.
that you
Well,
really
I
like
think,
about it.
I think as engineers, I think obviously we like the technology, and one of my phrases for our team is make the stuff work, guys, because nothing matters but making it work. If you can make it work, we can wrap a company around it.
I think that, I don't know if I call it a low point, I call it a challenge, but when you're doing all of these changes in an organization, you have an organism, you have a body, and you're bringing in new organs, and it's an organ transplant. How do you make sure that these organs are not rejected, including yourself as the new CEO, right? And so that's the challenge, and then the bliss is when you have a highly functioning team passing the ball around the table to each other, interacting without you needing to actually drive it. And I know that that's a different situation than what others on the panel have, but we're kind of getting there now with our company.
For me, it's it's one of the toughest parts. It's really the fundraising and how some conversations evolve around the time. So you would talk with somebody when you just started, and I've started talking with people from really the second week, even corporates. And sometimes the first questions would be like, "Oh, when are you going to be first in human?" And then you would talk to them later, and come back to me when you have 5 patients. Tell us when you do your first in human, or when are you going to be ready for pivotal? What's your pivotal study design? So, that's, to me, that's the most frustrating part, and the most exciting part is just being able to talk with someone and then come and tell them we're going to do this, and then come back a year later and say we're 1 month ahead of time or 2 months ahead of time. That's what really excites me.
I will speak about what drives me. I don't think that there is much which is frustrating me, sincerely. But driving, I already gave a glimpse about it. It's about impact. I really feel that we have an impact. Now we're seeing our product being used, some patient being satisfied, some physician telling that the product is fantastic, and that's really fulfilling. And I mean, I can reflect some years ago when we came up with some drawings and we thought that it could help. That's just fantastic to see how far we went.
Okay, a couple of minutes left. Maybe a question from the audience about the role of the CEO, fundraising that we mentioned. As we said, building teams, what's difficult in the role, what's easy. Any questions you guys would like to ask? All right.
Friday afternoon in Malta.
Yeah, Friday afternoon, Malta. It's I think there's yeah. Go ahead.
Hi there. If you would go back and go and see the younger, more naive you, what would you go back and tell yourself? And I mean naive with respect, by the way.
I think trust your instincts a little bit sooner than you feel comfortable trusting them. And then you'll learn that over time. But I think there are several changes that I would have made that I waited a little too long to do. You can't just completely go with your intuition. I get that. You have to have some sort of analysis around it. But when you get to 80% of that analysis, trust your gut after that.
To me, and this was a rookie mistake multiple times in the first 2, it's you're a good engineer, but no one cares. Because I had tendency to focus on the technology and the IP.
I would remind myself to tell my wife sooner that I wasn't being paid.
And maybe for me it would be that a no, it's not a no in business. So when people say no, don't stop necessarily. You may find a way to convince people other way.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Youssef, Greg, Mathieu. Thank you. It was a great discussion. And thank you guys for listening. And think we're done for this session.
Thank you, everybody.